everyone, and welcome to Walking in Wellness podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christina Carman, and I'm delighted that you're here joining us today because I am so excited about this topic. We're going to talk all about reactive and proactive eating. And as a naturopathic doctor and nutritional therapist, this is something that I face often with my patients. And I wanted to really come on here and highlight some of the things that maybe that we can look at and apply to our lives. So today what we'll cover is what is preventative eating, and then what is reactive eating, and then why does this even matter? I want to touch a little bit on what makes up a good diet, because again, this is a really contentious subject and I think there's so much confusion around here. I also want to touch a little on digestion and gut health. And in next episodes, we'll go in much more depth on digestive and gut health and what we can really do from that perspective. But I will highlight that today. Then we're also going to touch a little on balancing blood sugar and, finish up with some key takeaways that you can take into your life. So let's kickstart, guys. Okay, so what is proactive eating? I think maybe it's important to define what this is. And it may sound maybe a little fancier than it actually is, but actually it means being proactive. So having a plan and being, not really allowing those external cues to affect your eating and your eating behaviors. Now, we have a really complex society, particularly in the West, particularly in the US, where, food is at abundance and, we can be very quick to pick anything. Anytime we have a thought in our mind, we're at it and we can go for these foods and we can eat and we can consume. And a lot of this means that, this ease of food means that we're really losing a lot of that proactive aspect of it and the mindfulness aspect of eating. And actually that's essentially what we need in order to really, really support our health long term. So when we're talking about proactive eating, what we really need to look at is, when are you going to eat? What will you eat? How much will you eat? And will you be eating mindfully? So these are my four sort of top things that I look at. And certainly what I would approach even for my own self when I'm putting together, my plan for the week or how I want to kind of structure my days around my meals. Now, proactive eating refers to making really those intentional choices about what we eat and how much we're eating in order to promote that optimal health and then hopefully prevent those chronic diseases. This really includes things like choosing the variety of nutrient vegetables and foods that are really going to support that well-being. So we're looking at fruits, we're looking at vegetables, potentially whole grains, lean proteins, and really healthy fats. Now, I think sometimes we don't really know, well, what's a lean protein and what's a healthy fat? And we will definitely discuss those in next episode. So this is just a lovely little abridged and abbreviated view for you guys to kind of get an idea and start thinking about what it means to plan your meals and to really be proactive about nourishing your body. So also what we were trying to look at when we're looking at proactive eating is, how are we going to limit the consumption of processed and high calorie foods? And this is what we touched on earlier, where we have such an ease in our society on, grabbing foods conveniently whenever we want, whenever the thought comes into our mind that we want something, or, the craving is there and off we go. So this is really where that proactive aspect comes in, is that you're really aware of what you're trying to not only nourish your body with, but potentially what you're limiting the consumption of. And what we really want to look at ultimately is trying to reduce the consumption of the processed and high calorie foods. So proactive eating really can have so many benefits when we're looking at our whole health. But one of the big ones that we look at, and this is another one that we talk a lot about in our society, with all this sort of weight loss opportunities that we have and easy access to potentially, is maintaining a healthy weight. But also reducing the risk of chronic disease. And that's really one that I look at massively, because with the chronic disease, the increases in this is just enormous. But also improving overall energy and well-being. Talk about enough, or maybe value enough, is, what does it mean to be healthy for me? What does it mean? What are my own goals long term that I really want to achieve? Is it to live longer? Is it to be more present with my family? Is it to be able to do this, that, and the other? I think it's really important to write down, what is your overall goal for your life and that's a really, really key component when we're looking at proactive eating and how we're going to build our lives and our lifestyle around that. So a lot of this requires some planning and preparation. I do understand that, and that's sometimes where it's challenging. But it doesn't take much, guys. I think taking a journal, maybe writing down some of your thoughts and some of your ideas, and kind of just starting from there. Maybe it also means maybe doing some meal prepping. I'm a big advocate of that. On Sundays, I'll spend an hour or something if I can carve out the time. Maybe it's a Saturday. It depends on what the schedule is, and busy households. I know it can be challenging, but carve out the time to meal prep a little bit for the week. So does that mean that you prep your brown rice or your quinoa in order for you to have those bases for those beautiful meals? Maybe it's you're already putting together some of your packed lunches so you don't have to eat out as often during the week. Maybe it's putting together grocery lists and shopping lists. Maybe it's then being able to make those healthier choices for when you are actually eating out. Now, what is reactive eating? So we talked a lot about proactive eating, but now what is a reactive eater? Now, a reactive eater means that you are reacting to hunger based on external factors like stress. That's huge. Boredom, and maybe other emotions. And I certainly see this clinically in my practice, is that emotions tend to be a really big driver when it comes to eating. I deserve this. I feel a bit low. I feel a bit stressed. I feel about this, that, and the other. And then you just go for those choices. Maybe you slept really poorly the night before. And this is also going to massively impact how you react and how reactive you are to those food choices and the eating choices. So this is also where the convenience of the food that we have at our disposal tends to be it may be the challenging point, because these foods tend to be really calorie dense, and they contain a lot more sugar and preservatives and fats that are not really going to serve us well. So definitely one to look at as a whole and see what you're doing. Now, this type of food, this type of eating in particular, will often lead to an overconsumption of high calorie low nutrient foods that can contribute to the development of those chronic diseases and obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. Oh my goodness, the list goes on. Then lastly, I'm going to touch briefly on what is obsessive eating. Now, I think as a nutritional scientist, nutritional coach, this is really an important one to identify the differences in eating behaviors, because we don't want to cause or encourage, shall we say, any kind of dysmorphic or obsessive eating behavior. That's not the intention of what we're trying to do here, nor is it the intention of my practice as a clinician to become obsessive about being so particular about certain foods. We want to make sure that we're looking at this as a form of empowerment and a form of way, a way that we can really support our health and well-being long-term, but not become obsessive about our foods. So, orthorexia, neurosis, and eating disorder that involves an unhealthy obsession with optimal nutrition. And guys, this can go both ways. So this can be, it becomes very much a preoccupation with perceived healthfulness. That's even a word I'm pronouncing correctly, of the food, that it's adversely affecting their health and daily activities. But also, we start to look at other disorders here, like binge eating disorder as part of this. We look at specific feeding and eating disorders. We look at avoidance, restrictive food intake disorders. Unspecified feeding and eating disorders here are all classified under this. So we really look at this as a component, or I certainly look at this as a component within my practice, to make sure that I'm not encouraging obsessive eating when it comes to how we approach our diet. I am encouraging, and I encourage all of us to look at how we can find balance and how we can really support that proactive versus the reactive eating, and find what works best for you within your life and within your remit. So, that being said, how do we become a proactive eater? Firstly, you really need a plan. That's number one that I would say. a food plan is going to ensure that you're getting exactly what your body needs. And as we touched on before, guys, this is not to be obsessive about it, okay? It's just about making a plan, like how you plan your day or you put your schedule together. Very similarly, look at what you're eating. Oh, what am I going to have for breakfast this week? What do I have in my fridge that I can put together? What am I going to have for my lunches? How can I really populate those meals so that I'm really nourishing my body? Nourish, nourish, nourish. So think about what your meals are going to be. Then what do you need to buy from the grocery store? Then maybe meal prep for the week. What is your goal as far as calorie intake is concerned? And maybe this might take a little bit of investigation for you specifically to figure out what is your BMR base and what is the goal as far as what you're trying to achieve. So whether you started a new workout regime or you're starting to exercise or you're moving your body a little bit more. Or you're really trying to achieve something because there's an underlying health condition here, so you're really trying to support something. So again, calories don't necessarily have to don't look at them as a negative thing. And please, again, we're not here to make this obsessive. We're looking at this in context as the whole picture. So based on that, then what is your protein intake? What is your carbohydrate intake? Then what is your timing? So should you be eating every 3-4 hours, or are you looking at maybe more of intermittent fasting kind of approach to the way that you put together your day and your meals? So again, this is very personal, and we will certainly do more shows on the specifics of intermittent fasting because there's a lot of science and data around that. And maybe sometimes some conflicting advice. So we will definitely follow up with more on that. There's so much to talk about. It's so exciting. So, and then from here, determine what time you will eat breakfast. And then from there, I like to sometimes plan the rest of the day. So, and again, then lastly, look at whether the fasting or intermittent fasting kind of plays a role into all of that. All right. So what do we look at? What makes up a good diet when we're looking at all of this proactive, reactive eating energetics, shall we say. So one of the things are macronutrients, are proteins, are carbohydrates and fats. And then I will also add in hydration because that's a really key one. And I will say that it's one thing that I see as a big component to just general overall health, but certainly from a digestive perspective, is the fact that we're not hydrating adequately. I think people think, well, I drink enough water in the day, I'm drinking 2 liters, but actually maybe they're drinking it all at once, or they've forgotten that they need to have a drink and then they're glugging loads of water very, very quickly. So this is actually not necessarily the best approach to hydration. What we want to make sure is that we're drinking consistently throughout the day. So slow, regular sips of water is really, really important rather than big, large, like, oh no, I forgot to drink. And then suddenly you're glugging loads of water. And then you need to go to the loo, 20 minutes later. So this is an important one to look at. Consistently and regularly take sips of water. Water on your desk, carry a water bottle with you, hopefully not in plastic, and, carry that sort of energy throughout the day. Okay. So very, very important one. Then let's look a little bit at digestion. Okay. So what are the components here that really matter? So now we've built our plate. We have our macronutrients, we have our hydration. We're looking at all of those components. Now, what is digestion? Okay, so digestion actually starts with intention. This is the intention of eating. Okay, I have a thought. Maybe I'm feeling a little hungry. I'm getting some signals. This intention, this energy is actually a really very powerful tool because it starts to build those digestive enzymes and start sort of assimilating those your gastric function in order to prepare the body to receive food. The next step is the senses. So is it sight? Is it smell? Is it, maybe you've tasted some of the food that you're preparing? This is a very important step. And often this is what gets missed when we have that really quick, convenient food. We have intention, and then very quickly, food is already in our mouths. And the senses are an important part because it starts the amylase production, one of our digestive enzymes in our mouths. It also, again, signals our stomach to prepare for food. Very, very important step that often we cut out and miss. And this intention to actually receiving food in our stomach takes about, 20 minutes or so. I mean, it's not an exact science really, but it depends very much. It varies on the person, but about 20 minutes, right? So you think about how quickly we can get food when we're in a fast food restaurant, within our culture, and we bypass that. So very important component there. The next step is chewing. Chewing, again, is so fundamental. So much of how we start the metabolism and the digestive process happens in our mouths. And that is the component here, is chewing. So are you chewing your food adequately, or are you swallowing very quickly and just, inviting food, shall we say, into our stomachs very, very quickly? The next step is the digestive enzyme process. So once the food's received in our stomachs, there's a whole amazing process that goes through to start really breaking down the food and extracting some very important nutrients. All starts to happen within our stomachs. Then small intestine. This is the biggest proportion of our nutrient absorption happens here. Then we go into our colon. So obviously our beautiful colon full of our bacteria, our gut microbiome is housed here. There's a whole beautiful transition that happens here. A lot of our hydration utilization will happen here. So many other incredible processes. And then lastly, we have elimination. So this is our incredible flow that we go through, and very, very important, I think, certainly from today, just to highlight on actually what matters here when it comes to, yes, I built that beautiful plate, but then what happens from a digestive function? So let's highlight a little on the microbes in the colon, in particular, the gut bacteria that, they're such a big buzzword, which it's talked about a lot within our society. Now we have trillions of organisms of gut bacteria, and believe it or not, this gut microbiome is the foundation to your health. So good gut health occurs when you have a balance between the good, the helpful, and the bad, potentially harmful bacteria and yeast in your digestive system. And actually, in fact, 80% of your body's immune system, probably even more and more, and the research is incredible and still very much unfolding, it is actually housed in your gut. Then also the majority of your body's serotonin is too, and a little bit of your dopamine production is also housed in your gut. So very important when we look at mental health presentation. What's happening with that gut and the gut health? What's happening with the diet? What are you nourishing the body with? So what this means to us is that if your gut is actually unhealthy, then potentially your immune system, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, all of these won't function adequately, and you could potentially get sick. So that's quite significant. A healthy gut also means that there are more good bacteria than harmful bacteria, and the harmful bacteria won't overtake the good. The balance of bacteria in the gut flora can lead to so many health benefits, including reducing the inflammation, which is huge. Again, we talk so much about this, inflammation and inflammation-driven diseases. And obviously this can really, this inflammation, again, huge, can lead to massive issues, heart disease, your increased chances of obesity. So many of our autoimmune conditions are very much linked now to inflammatory or rises in inflammation. So what do we need in order to really make that gut thrive? So again, it can get very, very personal here. And I think this is where it's helpful to potentially work with a nutritional therapist or someone in that industry, or a health coach that has experience on, what works best for you, because it is very personal. Not everyone is going to thrive on certain types of diets, because there's so many different factors, from genetics to their chronotype to their their metabolic type as well. All of these things really impact. Sometimes some people look at even their blood group can matter as far as how they use and utilize certain foods. But generally, I start to look at what are the difficult things that the body finds difficult to digest. And sometimes this ends up meaning the gluten, the dairy, in some cases, some eggs. We look at seeds and nuts, potentially nightshade vegetables, soy, some grains, all were flours and sugars, and corn, potentially those foods that you're sensitive to. And this is where it comes into potentially, to look into, what might be those drivers for you. And then obviously toxins. So that's a tricky one, but we will talk much more on toxins moving forward. So these tend to be the ones that we would remove in order to support resetting that gut. Now, what are the foods that we look at to re-inoculate or to really support the body and support the gut in particular? So we're looking at our probiotic rich foods. These are our kimchi, our sauerkraut, kombucha, tempeh, soy, natto, or miso rather, which is soy-based, natto, also soy-based, kefir. You can do water kefir, certainly if you have some dairy issues. See, we look at yogurt, so dairy or even coconut. Sometimes these can be fermented. We look at garlic, onions, asparagus, banana, Jerusalem artichoke, dandelion, greens, all your green veggies, those beans and legumes because they're rich in the fiber. We look at chicory root and cacao. So amazing, amazing things to re-inoculate. And now obviously this is just a general list, guys. Not everyone's going to fare well with these foods. Particularly we look at probiotic rich foods. Sometimes when you start to introduce those, they can cause some movement, shall we say, within our gut for some people, because they're very histamine rich and they're very enzyme rich. So it's creating some activity within your gut. So again, this is potentially where it would be helpful to sort of figure out or isolate maybe what are some of the drivers for you as far as your digestive function, maybe what are some of the foods that you might be sensitive to, and then kind of look at from there how you can take the steps forward in including these really very important foods in our diet. Just because you're sensitive to a certain food now doesn't mean that you're always going to be, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's a toxic burden. Sometimes it's, there's a bit of an imbalance in your commensal bacteria, and that needs a little bit of support in order for you to step forward and heal. And then you can start to see about reintroducing some of those foods and see how your body fares with them. So what are some of the foods that we look at potentially to supplement this repair? Now we look at bone broth, we look at aloe, very, very beautiful to support the repair of the gut lining. We look at we look at collagen powder. That's another one. Sometimes apple cider vinegar we look at as far as supporting that whole digestive function. So the stomach acid and the enzyme function of our stomach, and also to support blood sugar regulation. Pineapple, glutamine, L-glutamine, it's one of our amino acids, really beautiful one to use. Ginger, dandelion greens, obviously those healthy fats. And I always have to put in water there because, again, that's an important one to look at. What do we do now to replenish? So these are the foods that we would start to reintroduce potentially once we've done some work to repair that gut. Now, those are the whole foods. Then we look, the whole eggs. Then we look at the seeds and the nuts. Then maybe the gluten grains, maybe not. Maybe that's something that you have to keep out indefinitely. The dairy, again, that's another one that can be a bit contentious for some people. Again, those nightshade vegetables. I would say with nightshade vegetables, sometimes if you have more autoimmune driven conditions, those might be ones that look at longer term because there's a little bit of conflict with the way that our bodies utilize and digest them. Again, this is potentially where it comes to play to work with someone who can advise you and to give you a little bit of support around these certain foods and how you can incorporate them into your diet, because it's not necessarily a no, it's just about how are you preparing these foods, or how are you using them, what are you eating them with in order for them to digest a little bit better for you. Okay, so now let's talk about blood sugar. Oh my goodness. I hope this isn't getting too dry for you guys. I know there's like a lot of information that we're throwing at you here, but there's so many things that I really wanted to cover that actually is so important when we look at proactive and reactive eating. And maybe sometimes feels a little bit like, well, she's totally gone off topic here, but no, actually this is really what we want to encourage and support. So why does blood sugar matter? And why does food pairing matter when we look at blood sugar? So in order for the order rather of the way that you eat actually matters for how our body's blood sugar spikes in particular. So we look at this is in context to the relationship with how you're eating, how quickly you're eating, and in what order you're eating. This is really interesting. And, there's a lot of research now on, if you eat, let's say, for example, like mango, white rice, tomato, and then let's say, for example, a shrimp ceviche in that order. And then we will test to see what happens with your blood sugar. And over, very quickly, you can see the huge rise in how your body very quickly switches on this blood sugar regulation, or blood sugar spike, rather. Very, very quick, sharp spike. Now, if we were to flip that, for example, and eat the tomato and shrimp ceviche first, then the rice, and then lastly the mango, we see a huge change in how the body responds and how the body's blood sugar spikes. So what we see here is potentially having the veggie starter and the protein first, and then layer in all those other things really matters. So let's give another example here. If we were to take just plain oatmeal, now we think a lot of us think that oatmeal is very healthy for us, and I'm not saying that it's bad in this case, but let's just look at it in context. We can see a very quick rise in blood sugar after eating oatmeal. Now, if you were to have, for example, like a turmeric and apple cider vinegar tea prior to eating your oatmeal, and then have your oatmeal, the rise in blood sugar is significantly less. So really, really want to look at. It's important to keep those blood sugar levels in your target range. So again, this is something that might be useful to figure out what is good for you, because it's slightly different for everyone. And the balance here throughout the day matters so much. And this matters. Why does this matter? Well, because this is where that reactive eating comes into play. Sometimes those cravings are very much driven by a real sort of up and down flow with our blood sugar. Blood sugar spikes and imbalances, unfortunately, are very closely linked to things like IBS. We start to look at hair loss clinically. We start to look at PCOS. We look at psoriasis. We look at, the constant hunger. We look at adrenal dysfunction or HPA axis dysfunction issues, fatigue, brain fog, see diabetes as well. So very, very important one to look at in context. So I'll give you guys another example here, okay? Or two more examples. A plain bowl of spaghetti, huge blood sugar spike. And this is the same for our children, okay? So really watch how we're feeding our kids and in what order we're feeding our kids. Now, if you were to take that same plain bowl of spaghetti, but put in an arugula salad first, you don't see the rise in blood sugar in the same way. And same thing with, let's say, pasta first, broccoli second, huge rise in blood sugar, versus the broccoli first and then the pasta second. You don't get nearly as much of a spike. So it's the food order and how you're eating is really significant. So try the veggie starter, guys, and let's see if that works for you. I'd love to hear your feedback and comments on how that works. So, and now, what does blood sugar and gut health have to do with proactive eating? Again, here comes the important factors. The gut microbiome, or the microbes, influence your blood sugar levels by acting directly on the liver, not necessarily by regulating the energy expenditure of specialized fat tissues, which can show us how you use glucose as fuel to create heat in our bodies. Now, the gut influences everything from heart disease to arthritis to certain cancers. And now the research has found that gut health, or lack thereof, may be linked to even type 2 diabetes. And having this awareness is really key in what could potentially motivate that proactive eating energies moving forward. So key nutrients here, guys, to consider as part of your whole picture, along with your proactive eating. And a lot of this, I would say, always think food first. Always, always, always food first, okay? And then we can look at layering, because supplementation never necessarily works. I should never necessarily work. That's a good one, isn't it? I think supplements are not as effective if the body isn't in a beautiful state to receive them. So if you're not in a hydrated state, if the digestive enzyme function in your stomach digestive function isn't functioning adequately, you cannot utilize those nutrients well. Okay, so that's first. Always look at food and hydration. That's number one. Clean up that diet. Figure out what works best for you. Find your proactive eating energetics. And then you can layer in some beautiful things like B vitamins, omega essential fatty acids, huge deficient in our societies. And we're so deficient in fiber. This prebiotic digestive enzymes, bitters, beautiful, beautiful ones to even just from food sources add into your diet. probiotic rich foods. We're not consuming enough of these. The fiber and the prebiotics and the probiotics, we do not get enough from our diet, and they're really very important. Then we look at magnesium. That's another beautiful, mighty mineral. We're very mineral deficient from our soil, from stress levels. This magnesium in particular, it's a very abundant mineral within our bodies, and we need it. We need massive, massive, massive amounts. And we're just simply not getting enough. And we see lots of clinical presentation from subclinical magnesium deficiency. We see herbs, add in those herbs. Very, very important one to really round out the diet, and to look at, key nutrients to add in. Then lastly, I'm going to put in hydration again. I always add this one in there, and I'm sure it's super boring already, but I take that hydration is a really, really key one. All right, guys. So as we wrap up, what are some key takeaways from today? Proactive eating is the aim. Okay? Proactive eating. But then it's a balanced eating energetic. Okay. So it's not obsessive. We're not reactive or going like, oh, I can't eat that. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's about balance. It's, having a little piece of chocolate occasionally is not a bad thing. Or, whatever it is, once in a while, it's okay. Our bodies are really beautiful and resilient. If you know that as a whole, you are eating a very balanced approach to nourishing your body. Then remember, gut health and blood sugar really matter. These are really very important. And then lastly, it's a whole person centered approach to how you look at your life. Look at all of those other drivers. Look at your stress, look at your sleep, look at your movement, maybe even look at the relationships within your space. Everything, all of those factors matter. Obviously, your health history, your family health history, all of these things will matter when you're looking at how we can support more proactive eating energetics. So there you go, guys. Thank you so much for joining and tuning in to me waffle along about all these things that I'm super passionate about. I hope you found things here that were really, really useful, that you can take away and say, look, I'm going to start planning my meals. I'm going to do all of the things. Well, no, don't do that. Don't overwhelm yourself. Start small, start somewhere where you can really bring a little bit of this energy into your life, and let me know how you get on. So thank you again for tuning in. I know you have a huge choice of what to listen to, so I'm so grateful for your time and for your energy, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks.